Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you here on the call with us tonight for Who Are the Honeybees with Alex Tuchman and Gunther Hauk. And this webinar is co-sponsored by OSNA and the Anthroposophical Society in America. So we're so glad you're joining us. And as people jump onto the call, we're just going to get you to use the Q&A function a little bit. I'd like if you could just tell me where you're calling from, and I can read some of that off. And then if you're affiliated with a Waldorf school or part of the society, that'd be great. We'd love to know that too. So welcome everybody. And you can use that Q&A if you can see that. That's like a little button at the bottom, and you should be able to type in where you're calling from. Okay, yeah, I see some people typing in there. Oh, hello, Waterloo, Ontario. Made it to the call. That's great. There we go. San Francisco, hello. London, Ontario, Keene, New Hampshire. That's great. Oh my gosh, so many people. Whidbey Island, another San Francisco Waldorf High School. Akron, Ohio, Birmingham, Alabama. The Waldorf School of Atlanta, hello. We were just there not too long ago. Central BC, oh, beautiful British Columbia. Long Island, New York. All these places have bees, right? I'm just making sure. Okay. Monadnock Waldorf School, Fallbrook, California, the Hartsbrook School in Hadley, Massachusetts. Hello. Thank you for calling in. Let's get a few more and then we'll get started. Yes, actually, I've got a note here from the San Francisco Waldorf School that they have 2 hives there. Alabama Waldorf School. Hello from Mexico, the Papalotes Waldorf School. Hi, thanks for joining us today. We're international. Some people are using the chat. That's okay too. But a Q&A, if you can type in there, that'd be a little better. Santa Cruz Mountains, Fallbrook, California, Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania. I know that place. Winchester, Massachusetts. Okay, and thank you all for typing things in. We've got people still coming on from all over the place, but I'm going to get started, and we'll have time for questions throughout. We have another school saying they have 5 hive, Hartsbrook School, Maine Coast Waldorf School, Ann Arbor, Michigan. So many people. Okay, so I just want to take a minute just to express my gratitude to you, Gunther and Alex, for holding this webinar with us. We've had over 400 people register for it, which is really amazing. And that means so many people are concerned and caring about the bees and want to learn more. And we're looking forward to you doing that. So just a quick introduction. You can see on the slide there, if you're on the computer, it says Spikenard Farm Honeybee Sanctuary, which is in Floyd, Virginia. And you're both there. And Gunther, you founded the sanctuary, correct, in 2006. And, you know, after being a Waldorf gardening teacher, a beekeeper for 40 years, I mean, what knowledge we have here. And he has your book, very well-known book, Towards Saving the Honeybee, calls for radical methods in changing how beekeeping is done. And we're thankful to have that out there. And we're looking forward to hearing about that. And Alex on the sanctuary too, beekeeper, educator, farmer, and a writer. That's so great. And you've been working with bees for 10 years, right? Do I have that right? Yep. Yep. And started working at the sanctuary in 2014. And we're just so glad that you're doing these webinars, and you've done some for the Biodynamic Association too. And so we're glad to have you both here. So I'm going to let you all get started, and hopefully everybody's been able to get on the call just fine. So thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Laura. And we also wanted to express our deep gratitude from the sanctuary, from the mountains here in Floyd, Virginia, where Spikenard is located. And if you haven't been up here, we're going to try to rope you in today because it's a great place to come visit. It's a really special place on Earth. It was the first honeybee sanctuary in the world, of course, the first honeybee sanctuary, then also in the USA. And yeah, Gunther really pioneered a important impulse for healing in this country and in the world. And of course, having that linked to anthroposophy and to biodynamics is a wonderful deed that, of course, all of these healing practices, the Waldorf education and anthroposophical medicine and biodynamics, are all addressing really important challenges that we're facing today as humanity. And it's a joy to be here, finally connecting to the Anthroposophical Society and to OSNA as a formal sort of partnership, because we really need to be together moving into the future. And we feel that anyone who has the soul to hear it needs to learn about what's going on with the bees and all that we can do to help turn this crisis around. So without further ado, I will let Gunther take us on a little journey here at the beginning, giving a broader context of where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. And then we're going to talk about the honeybees as an organism and sort of get into some of the nitty-gritty details of their mystery and the magic of their life. And then we'll take some time for questions. And then we're going to take the back half of the webinar to talk about the bees and the land as a unity. So not just putting bees on the land, but also bringing our consciousness to the landscape, to the flowers, and to what our neighbors are doing in order to more fully serve the bees. And we'll talk a bit about what's going on here at the sanctuary and show pictures all the way through. So
that's so great. And I just wanted to say, if anybody's experiencing any like technology or connection that might be coming through, just bear with us. So if I interrupt the few of you, just be patient with me. There might be a little glitch happening, and I just want to slow it down.
Okay.
So
yeah,
okay,
we're happy
great.
to repeat anything or slow down if the technology is not working well.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Gunther.
Well, it's great to be here on my first webinar, a part of it. So thank you all for joining us. The title is actually, Who is the Honeybee? And that is really one of the great mysteries that we have to solve. And our relationship to the honeybee goes back actually a very long time. I think science knows that too. And what we generally don't know is that she was created by the human being, just like we created the dachshund and the chihuahua and the Great Dane. And so it's not just a being that is and has been in nature, but it has a deep, deep connection to the human being. So that sacredness was still there in the Egyptian times, in the temple scenes, in the Greek temples, and went on for a while into the monasteries. The monks were the beekeepers, actually. And right now, the bee has become a commodity, something that you can exploit to the utmost. So we have to see how we can recapture through our understanding what she really is. Now I want to branch out a little bit and say that we have a very intimate relationship to the animals, whether we like some of them or not. Like the groundhog is not just a favorite of every gardener, but we have that relationship that is on the soul level. The Greek word anima means the soul. So in our thinking, our feeling, our emotions, and in what we do, we are deeply related to the animal realm, which eventually we want to overcome. We want to become more and more human. So we have in our thinking and in what we do, we have the sly fox, we have the timid deer, we have the boar and the stubborn donkey and the bloodthirsty weasel, and all of that is in us as a potential. And we can have also the busy bee in us. And if we have the busy bee in us, we are not only busy, but we are busy in a very, very special way. Because the bee, in all that she does, in everything that she does, she is completely dedicated to serving nature in its totality. All the plants, all the animals, all the human beings are actually sustained by her, not only by the pollination, but by the formic acid, by that poison that she distributes in nature. Steiner talks about that in the bee lectures. It's very interesting to read up on that. So the individual bee, when she hatches, the first thing she does is clean the cell, and every job then is that every task is guided and is internalized. All her organs actually mature in such a way that she can do the specific job in a perfect way. So she warms, she feeds, she brings in honey, nectar actually, and makes honey out of it. She secretes the wax platelets and then makes honeycombs. And as a colony, she also serves nature in a selfless way. Because when you look at a swarm, the swarms are only about 75% of them die in nature unless the beekeeper catches them. And so they go out and swarm with not a high success rate of surviving. And they do it nevertheless because new colonies have to be established, new queens have to be raised. So looking at everything, every detail of her anatomy, of her life activity shows us that she is, I would say, 98 to 99% in service and only takes about 1% or 2% for herself. That
Wow.
is truly amazing. And what is so special about her, Steiner writes about that in those bee lectures called Bees. He says the honeybee is cosmically precocious. Cosmically precocious. And that means she can do things that we can't do yet at this stage of evolution. And that we can be guided toward what she is doing in our evolution. So this utter selflessness, well, we have examples in history and probably at the present time, maybe people down the street whom you don't know, who are extremely selfless and only take a little bit for their own needs. But Francis of Assisi, Elizabeth of Thuringia, people like that showed it to a great extent how selfless the human being can become. And if you put that into anthroposophic terms, Steiner talks about the transformation of our soul life, of our astral body, the transformation into that which becomes intimate part of our eternal being. And that is the spirit self, or the manas in an old terminology. And that spirit self is in total sync with the goals of humanity, of evolution, in complete selfless activity, in thought, in feeling, in actions. And for me, this is actually what the group soul of the honeybee, the spiritual bee, or what the American Indians called the great bee or the great buffalo, what this spiritual being actually is and can show us which way we can evolve further. Of course, we are free. We can make the hamster more of our part of the life and the sly fox and all of that. But we can also evolve toward that goal of humanity, which is at the end of Earth evolution. The only animal that is even more cosmically precocious are the corals.
We'll say that again. What is it?
The
coral.
are even higher than the honeybee in evolution.
Wow.
And because they are so far advanced, they are also in great danger because they are not completely adjusted to our state of being. And we can see that now, especially, you know, you frack whatever you can and take whatever you can, and the altruism isn't very much there, except in individuals. So we have the choice to go forward or to go back in evolution. And the honeybees actually can show us how we can serve all of life. And that's actually why she was considered sacred. And that sacredness has to be regained. It's not there right away, but I think at the sanctuary, when people come, more and more people come who have an innate yearning to serve the honeybee and to serve nature and to become a true steward. So there's a lot of hope there too in everything that we witness otherwise. So we need to take care of her. We need to let the spiritual be know that there are people here on earth who don't only want to exploit her and see how many pounds of honey you can get out of her and how many dollars out of pollination and all that. That's big business, and we individually have to go the other way. So that so far as to who that being might be and what she does actually. And there on your screen, you probably see a beautiful picture. Vivian takes those pictures, and you see that hairy bee, and you should never, ever paint a bee black and white. That's a yellow jacket. So I always cringe a little bit when I see those pictures of yellow and black bees that are actually yellow jackets. So,
because this bee is what colors are you seeing here in this beautiful picture, in case people can't see it? I mean, it looks like they're like hugging or kissing each other, like they're so close, like looks like they're caring for each other so beautifully. But
they are touching their antennas, and what you can see is that entire bee is filled with hairs. Even the 6,000 facet eyes in each big eye has a hair growing out of it. So the hairs are sense organs. And yeah, you have to paint her differently than the yellow jacket.
Wow, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Want to continue?
Yeah. So Gunther already pointed to this sort of the modern state that we're in today. And one thing that we have from spiritual science is this attitude towards truly trying to understand the other, whoever that is and whatever our work is, to have enthusiasm and earnest interest in the other. And we're at a point today with our relationship to the honeybees where this understanding, who is this being, is more important than ever. And when you go to the modern beekeeping clubs, for example, or anywhere you go, a conference where they're teaching about beekeeping, you ask any beekeeper, do you love your bees? And the answer is almost undoubtedly yes. And we have to believe that all beekeepers really do love their bees. But for us, it's a question of understanding. How can we really serve the bees? How can we really give them what they need if we do not understand them? How do we show them that we love them? And in understanding how this organism functions, we get closer and closer to that. Actually, that's the very foundation in biodynamic beekeeping of understanding what we need to do, is by understanding the instincts and the true essence of the honeybee. So I want to take you into that journey a little bit. We don't have that much time for it. We could spend days on this, and we do sometimes.
Yes.
But just to give you a little taste and to plant a seed. So, for example, this one bee that we're looking at here on the screen, this is a worker bee. And she has in her antenna 7 different senses. So she can taste in her antenna, and she can smell in her antenna, and she can sense humidity and wind speed and temperature. It's an amazing, she can hear with her antenna. Those 2 little antennae on the front, all of those senses are right there. So when you saw that picture of the 2 bees touching their antenna together, it's so special, the relationship and the information they can share with that. But this one bee, this one organism has a consciousness and has a capacity to make decisions, to go through different jobs, to carry out tasks within the whole organism. But alone, one honeybee is actually, she doesn't have a self-worth without the entire colony. So she is one of about 50,000 or 40,000 bees. And when you see all of those bees acting together, as in a swarm, you understand also that there's this greater consciousness and there's this greater reality that the whole hive can make decisions together. So natural science is coming around to this very strongly now too, calling the honeybees a superorganism. And we're seeing that we can start applying this idea of beingness as we would an individual dog or an individual cat, also to an individual bee colony. And sometimes even the swarms look like people, right?
Wow, this picture
like
really shows that.
That's the
Yes.
biggest one I've ever caught.
This is a huge swarm landed on a peach tree in the sanctuary. But
Wow.
a swarm can decide all together, first of all, that they're going to swarm in the first place. They're going to reproduce. They're going to create a new colony. And half of the bees in the hive leave and they go off into the air. And they create a new entity with this internal split that then becomes an individual hanging there on the tree. And the beekeeper will go and catch that swarm. And we put those swarms into their body. So this is almost like a soul that is hanging there on the tree that needs new bones and it needs new skin. And the work of the beekeeper, the very first work of the beekeeper is to provide for the bees in that regard.
Wow.
This one looked sort of like a sloth hanging. So amazing swarms, amazing the work that is done. And when a hive is just bees, or when an entity like this is just bees, the first job it needs to do when it enters into its new box, into its new woodenware, a hollow tree or the side of the barn, the first thing it needs to do is to create wax. And Gunther mentioned this, that the worker bees have the special task to create wax. So they eat honey and they sweat out wax out of their abdomen. And in the complete darkness, they build these hexagonal cells. And these cells become the storage pantry for the foragers when they come back with nectar. And the bees ripen that nectar into honey, and they use that nectar also to continue sweating out wax. And they'll fill their colony with these big wax sheets that they've sweat out themselves. And if we let the bees do that naturally, they can figure the comb to the external environment. So there's a deep relationship between the size of the cells that the bees are building and what's needed in the environment and what's also needed within the hive. So this is actually a picture looking below a hive up into the hive from the bottom. And these are where the bottom of the combs are hanging. And you can see how curvy they are. The bees are very creative in their building and adjusting to the needs of the season. and also to the needs internally to have a nice warm hive. They need it to be 95 degrees in there all season long. And in order to generate that warmth, they create these pockets, and they do the warming themselves. It's an incredible work. Did you have a question, Laura?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know if most people have seen like a hive structure that looks like this, because I think most people are used to the boxes and what that looks like inside. And so this, you said, was from underneath, and it's not in a box, right? It's
yeah, this is in a hive that's called a Warre hive. That's W-A-R-R-E. And Abby Warre invented this hive. It's also known as the People's Hive. And it is organized to be closer to a tree trunk, how the bees would move into a tree trunk in nature and build big, long sheets of comb from the top to the bottom of their hive. We're going to see some pictures of that Warre hive in just a minute.
Great.
So inside the comb, the workers bring nectar, and that nectar is ripened into honey. And it goes into the bee's honey stomach. They have a special stomach that churns nectar as if you were kneading bread, and enriches it with enzymes and ferments, and takes what was nectar and begins to change it into something else. It's really a fermented product. And the bees do that work of fermentation inside of these beautiful hexagonal wax cells. And they take nectar from thousands of flowers in a huge diversity, if they're in a beautiful landscape that supports them. And they mix all of that together in these hexagonal cells. And then when that cell begins to get full, the bees fan their wings over that, and they draw out the moisture content. And when the moisture content is about 17%, they cap it. So they cap it with wax, and that is the most stable food on earth. It can survive thousands of years. They found honey in King Tut's tomb that was still good. It was probably really difficult on the teeth. You maybe had to use a chisel to get it out of the vessel. Yeah. But it's amazing to note that honey does not spoil, and thank God, because the bees need that to survive through the wintertime. They make surplus honey so that they can survive when there's no flower in nature. And this relationship that they have to the human being, and the way that we've cultivated that relationship, has also made it that the bees in a good year give us their true surplus. So that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later too, that the bees actually do give us honey, and it is important for our health that we are able to take some honey into our being.
And it's the only bee that makes that surplus. The bumblebees don't, and all the other bees don't make more than what they need.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So the worker bees are really known for doing the work, for being they connect everything together. They're like the flowing blood that brings nutrients where it needs to go and waste where it needs to go, and nutrition, nourishment, all of the life processes, all of the nourishment processes happen through the worker bees. And their selfless service is really an incredible thing to note within the beehive. And it's not just the honey that we mentioned, but also the pollen. So on the bottom left, you see pollen that's stored in cells as well, that sort of yellow color, and there's some that are a little bit more orange, some that are deep red. A lot of different, every plant will have a different color pollen, and so different nutritional value. And the bees also, they go out and they collect that, and that's something that they ferment as well. So they add their own enzymes, and they add a little bit of nectar, and they add a little bit of water, and it actually rises up in the cell like bread, and they pack it down, and it rises up again, and they pack it down. As if you were making a sourdough loaf, they create what's now been called bee bread. And that bee bread is something really important. They feed their young larvae. So in the spring, when the hive nest is really growing, you'll see bees coming back with those huge pollen packets on their hind legs there. It's amazing how they can carry it and how heavy their bodies are coming in.
Yeah.
You know, they fly out of the hive straight and they come back to the hive hanging low, like really heavy load.
Big saddlebags.
Yeah. And they come and meet each other and brush each other off and collect the pollen that's still on each other's backs. See the one on the left, she still is covered in pollen. So there'll be bees coming with in their middle legs and their front legs. They have little combs that they comb each other off and make sure that they get all the pollen cleaned off. And it's an amazing process to see them coming in, and a great joy for us as beekeepers in the spring to see the pollen coming in. So the workers, that's sort of this, we've looked at two organs, if we can say it, within this organism so far. If we look at the bees, we've had the wax comb as this vital organ where all of the life processes have their basis. And then we have the worker bees who sort of maintain that comb, who build that comb, and who utilize it for their work in nourishment, in creating bee bread and creating honey. And the bees going out, you know, doing this work. One bee collects, you know, maybe a tablespoon or two of honey a day, but it's the mass of bees that are doing all of this work that creates such an incredible pollination service and the spread of formic acid through a landscape that's so important for nature. And now we're going to move to the drones. So the drones, this guy pictured here, you see he looks a bit different from the worker. The drone can be distinguished. He has a big fat body and he's got a furry butt. He actually doesn't have a stinger. And he's quite a bit bigger than the worker bee. He's got big eyes. And the drone is, in the bee lectures, Steiner refers to the drone as the nerves of the colony. You can see in the eyes, actually, that the sense capacity of the drone is the highest of any of the bees. It actually has double the lenses in each eye that the worker has even, and also double the amount of sense receptors in the antenna. And the drone's main task is a very social one. It actually travels throughout the landscape, and it can go from hive to hive, passing information. It allows a whole landscape of beehives to be connected together. No other worker is allowed to go from one hive to the next hive. She will be kicked out. She'll be fought at the entrance. She won't be allowed in. But the drones are sort of the social beings of the landscape, and they go from one beehive to the next. And if you watch them, they're always passing information. They're bumping heads and antenna with every bee they see along the way. And their role cannot be undervalued as a really important thing for us to understand. This is a radical thing. If any beekeepers out there know this, nobody spends time talking about the drones except for ho-hum and how terrible they are and worthless. But for us, it's a really important component that we can't overlook, especially when the bees are like a patient in the emergency room, is what Gunther says. They need our attention and they need our care. And so really trying to understand the drones has been a real joy, and then sharing that with others is a big part of what we're trying to do as we understand the hive as a totality, as an organism. And what you will hear at all the other beekeeping clubs is that the drones are fertilizing queens, which of course is also very important.
But that's the only thing everybody sees,
yeah.
You know. So because they don't work, they aren't worth as much.
Right, they don't make honey, so they're not making us money, so why do we have them?
Oh, geez.
All right, so, and right in the middle here, we have our queen, and she is clearly the hardest worker. If we talk about her life, it's very special. She can be distinguished when you're looking in the hive. For those who see her right in the middle, her wings come only about halfway down her abdomen. all of the worker bees, their wings, as they're folded across the back, they come almost to the base of the abdomen, to the bottom of the bee. But the queen's abdomen is full of two huge ovaries that contain thousands and thousands and thousands of eggs that are developing. And it takes about 5 hours from the egg to begin as a germ to become a full egg as she lays it out of her abdomen. And in the height of the season, a queen can lay about 2,000 eggs a day, which is more than her own body weight. It's an incredible transformation of substance from the workers that are around her, nursing her, feeding her, making sure that her metabolism is strong with good, healthy food, because every single one of those 2,000 eggs she lays has to have a yolk inside. And that yolk has to have enough energy for that egg to survive 3 days before it hatches into a larva. So the amount of energy and the potency of that queen and her health and her vigor is something so important also for beekeeping. And we're focusing here on natural queens. We don't have time to go into that today, but natural queens is something that has been taken off the market, basically. More than 95% of our queens in America today are artificially raised. And this is a huge part of the beekeeping crisis that we're looking at. So what we're teaching at the sanctuary is working only with natural queens, very important component of biodynamic beekeeping. And of course, she is a central factor in this hive as an organism. She's sort of the organ that the whole hive revolves around. With no queen, the hive really has no future.
And I just want to let people know that we're going to talk about the wax and the hive body, I think, next. And then if you're thinking about questions now, be ready to ask some of those. We're going to have a little time for some questions coming up.
Yeah. So this is just a picture you can see of the eggs of the queen in the bottom of each one of these cells. They look like little white rice kernels.
Oh.
2,000 eggs a day is what she's laying, and she places her abdomen down into the bottom of the cell and glues it there at the bottom so that the worker bee can develop. And those in the middle, you see those juicy larvae. So those eggs hatch out, then they develop into larvae. And on the 9th day, those larvae stretch out and the cell is capped. So all of those golden brown capped cells that you see on the left, those are actually developing pupa. So the picture we're looking at here is actually right in the center of what would be called the brood nest, or the queen's chamber, where she's doing most of her work and laying her eggs. And this part is where the hive is the warmest, where it needs to be 95 degrees at all times for those larvae to properly develop. And then the last thing, and very important, because it's actually the beekeeper that controls this, is what is the body? How are we incarnating this hive? What woodenware are we putting around the outside? Well, we have to really look at this as a sacred task, that we're actually giving the bees their body. And it's something that we've looked over, and we've made them as thin as possible so that the hives can be easily shipped, and so that we can practice migratory beekeeping, which is also something very detrimental to the bees' health, where they're moved from one monoculture to the next to the next. So, right now it's like 75% of America's bees are in California for the almond pollination. And then they're going to get moved down, and they make a big circuit around the United States, from the oranges to the grapefruit to the apples to the cranberries to the blueberries. They're needed at all of these monocultures because the bees can't survive there year round. So they're shipped around in these small little thin boxes that aren't good for the bees' health. So thinking about thicker boxes, thinking about different styles of boxes. This is called a top bar hive. And you can see the chickens are doing a very good job maintaining it. This is what the inside of a top bar hive looks like. So you just have wooden bars across the top, And the bees draw their comb straight down from those wooden bars into that cavity, and they make these beautiful forms that are approaching roundness. And the bees really approach roundness in the way that they build their hives, like they would in a hollow tree trunk. So the top bar hive is something that natural beekeepers are getting into all over the place, and it's more suited to warmer climates than colder climates.
So I just want to add, here are two of my former interns, and that's how we work the bees. We don't even own a suit. So, you know, the suits that the beekeepers have, they look like they're going to the moon. This is relationship. If you have the right relationship, you don't have to suit up. And so we do get an occasional sting, but we don't worry about that. But not enough to work, you know, not that many.
Yeah. And then this is the Waré style hive that we showed from below the picture looking up at that comb. So the bees begin building this comb at the top, and it's unlike any other beehive that you actually add a new box below rather than above, so that the bees start building from the top and they start drawing their comb down, and when they're 3/4 down and they need more room, you add the new box to the bottom so they can just continue that motion of building the comb down. And you can see it's a little bit more square than rectangle. Has a top insulation box, which is very nice. We also at the sanctuary, we're sporting 7 or 8 different styles of hives. So we're trying different hive bodies to explore the methods that are needed to keep different styles of hives alive. So we're not against any style of hive, from Langstroth all the way to this is called a sun hive, which is sort of on the opposite spectrum. It's not very heavily manipulated by the beekeeper, but it gives a lot of swarms, and because it's round and has a thick insulation, it's very healthy for the bees. And this is sort of what the inside looks like. That's one arched frame that we pulled out over from that sun hive. And then we have a hive developed at the sanctuary called the Spikenard hive. And this one is also very heavily insulated on the inside. And it actually curves down towards the bottom. And that space in between the board that's curving and the outside board is filled with insulation. So it's cooler in the summer and it's warmer in the wintertime for the bees. And the frame, when it's pulled out, it looks like that. So we have a little curved bamboo along the outsides to help the bees, but they build beautifully in this new hive. And then this last one here to look at, it's a hexagonal hive that runs horizontal like a top bar. And the frames look like this. That's a happy beekeeper.
Yes. That's really great. Oh my goodness.
Okay,
wow.
I would like to stop now, yeah, for questions if we could.
Yeah, that's great. So if you have questions now or thoughts you want to share, you can jump in and share those right now. So you can type them right into the Q&A if you'd like. And I know we had a few Waldorf schools sharing that they had hives. I'm wondering too if they knew all this. I mean, I just learned so much. I didn't know about, about the drones and the queen and how hard she's working. I mean, I knew she was working hard, but okay. And if you could please just type your question into the Q&A, that'd be great. I have some people raising hands. It's a little harder for me to get to. So if you could type your questions in there. And let's just give people one more minute to see if they have questions, and if they don't, we can just keep going.
That's
talk
fine.
about the sanctuary next.
Yeah.
It means that we've said everything crystal clear, right?
Yeah. So again, if you can type into the Q&A rather than raising your hand, that'd be great. I have someone here from Colorado that I know, and I think maybe she's got a question that's going to come. And Let's see. Okay, well, here we go. We just have somebody saying that it's really fascinating, and it's so much more than they've learned in their entomology courses. So thank you for this nice reframe. Yeah, and we have some people asking, is there a hive you would recommend for cold weather? They live in Maine, very cold. And then we have a couple more questions coming too. So you want to go with that one first?
Yeah. For beginning beekeepers in cold climates, we actually do recommend starting with a Langstroth hive. And actually for any climate, we recommend starting with a Langstroth hive because actually the learning curve is the steepest and the bees need the most care in those hives. But there's also the most resources. It's the most popular hive in the world. So they're the most books and easy to get equipment and easy to find a mentor and easy to find resources in your area. And the important thing we learn through Langstroth beekeeping is actually how to care for bees in any other style of hive. So in northern climates as well, the Waré hive, for example, is becoming quite popular. But I would recommend really hives that are vertical, that are upright, not horizontal hives. As further as we go north, the more difficult it is for the bees to overwinter in horizontal hives.
Okay, that's great. Oh, there's so many hive questions right now. One of them is asking for plans for hives, and I think if we can send a link or something like that, or resources for hives, we'll include that in the email that comes out. And people are just talking about that Waré hive and how heavy it must be to get everything underneath, and how you do that.
We can include that in the email too. We have a little crank that lifts it up from the bottom that you can lift. So if you don't have 3 people to lift up the hive, you can do it yourself. Yeah.
If you don't have interns with you.
The management of the Waré hive is much less than a Langstroth. It's only twice a year.
Okay, gotcha.
So it makes it easier. In the spring and in the fall, you basically do that work, and then you have to just monitor it through the whole season.
Okay, great.
And if you're not up in Canada or where it's very cold, the top bar actually has one great advantage. You only lift one frame at a time. That is about 4 pounds, and not a box that weighs about 40 or 50 pounds. So that is a great advantage if you're a little older or a little weaker.
Yeah.
Yes, that'd be the one I would use. Okay, so some more questions here. There is someone asking, there are more questions about the hives, but there is someone asking about the honey process from pollen to honey. And so I don't know how, if maybe we can cover that in a little bit, or if you can say it in like a sentence or two, that would be great. But if you feel like it'll be a longer answer, we can take it on a little bit later. But I don't know if
I don't quite understand it. The pollen, the whole process of creating and fermenting pollen and making it into bee bread.
Yes, I think
used for a specific function different than the honey.
Than the honey. Okay, good. I think that answers it. That's great.
Does that make sense? Okay.
I think that does. Yep. Do you ever feed the bees during the winter? What do you feed them? People are asking, what are the principles of the sanctuary? And we're going to get into that next. So I think that goes along with this. Do you feed the bees kind of thing? What do you feed them?
Right. Good. Yeah, we'll talk about that in the next section for sure.
Okay, that's great. And then let's see. Okay, there's 2 questions here about acquiring bees, acquiring a queen that's not cloned, finding natural bees if you can't catch a swarm. Any advice you have on that? And we have another question then about chemicals for mites. So those 2 maybe, the acquisition and then the mites.
Okay. You want to take one?
Yeah. Sometimes it's just necessary to get a package if there's no other way, and then give that bought package the best care that you can. But if you have a beekeeper close by and you can find a beekeeper who has swarms, then you might be able to get what is called a nuke, a nucleus colony, 5 frames with brood, honey, pollen, honeycomb, and that would be a great start. But the more local you are, the better off you are. Because if you get bees from Alabama or Texas and you're up in Maine or you're up in Michigan, or, you know, then they are not really acclimated to your climate.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a good point to differentiate between getting bees and that process, which can be a little bit more difficult to start right away. And then what do we do when we have the bees, and how do we expand our apiary once we've got hives sitting already there? Because then we have always the capacity to focus on natural queens and allowing the bees to swarm. But if we don't have those resources right there with us already, we might have to make a compromise and get a package or get a split nuke from somebody else. But the best thing to do if you're interested in swarms also is to go to your exterminator and your fire department and give them your name and your phone number and tell them you'll give them a jar of honey if they'll happily call you when they have a swarm. And then you just go and catch a swarm when you can, and that's a great way to start with natural bees that are local to your area.
That is a great tip. Thank you. That's a great tip. Okay, and I think we'll do one more question here, and that is, you had said that the drones were the nervous system. Are the other bees other parts of the body? Is there like this, you know, is there a correspondence? The hive is the body, the drones are the nervous system. Is there another link there, or is it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the wax, the honeycomb, that is actually very similar to our bones. The bee can't live without the honeycomb, and we can't without bones. And the wax, just like the bones, comes out of the blood circulation and the bloodstream. So the drones, that's the nervous sense pole. Actually, the queen is the muscle. She actually works the hardest. And Alex mentioned it already, the workers are like our bloodstream, taking the nourishment to every cell, wherever it's needed.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And so for some of you that still have questions like about the chemicals and the mites and getting a queen that's not cloned, we can try to take those on a little bit later. But I think, you know, we would like to, some of these questions all go back to tell us about the sanctuary and the philosophy there, and how we can participate, how we can come learn from you face to face and those kinds of things. So we'll try to get back to those questions. And if we don't, I will make sure I get those answers to you if you email me with those questions. So go ahead.
Great. Okay, so the Honeybee Sanctuary, we have 25 acres here in the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. And most of our work as beekeepers, in terms of hours and labor, is actually caring for the land. Mm-hmm. And the care of the land is this really important realization that the bees and the landscape are a unity. And the bees cannot be healthy if the landscape is unhealthy. And the degree to which we can nourish the landscape with flowers that provide pollen and nectar for the bees and for the hummingbirds and for the butterflies and the native bees, we're increasing the value of our landscapes by a huge degree. And of course, we're promoting these incredibly beneficial insects in our landscapes. And also birds and the whole food chain that's attached to that. So in order for us to work in a biodynamic way, we're providing the bees with the highest quality nectar and pollen through the biodynamic agricultural practices, which include compost and the sprays and the preparations, and the view of the land as an individuality and as a whole, and trying to create a balanced landscape for the bees that they can pick and choose and really use the landscape as their medicine cabinet for healing and for gathering the things that they need to stay strong and vital and healthy going into the future. So our landscape here, we're really on the top of the mountain, and we try to have things coming year round. So in February already, we're going to see our pussy willows begin to bloom. And it's amazing to try to fill in those gaps that nature doesn't provide something with what we can plant from our knowledge. So pussy willows are a great one to start with, and the bees get a ton of pollen there. Here's another variety of pussy willow. The tulips and the bulbs are sort of the first at the beginning of the season that come out, and they grace the landscape. The crocuses and the other bulbs, the snowdrops and grape hyacinth and things like that are all coming in the early part of the season. And for us, when the dandelion comes into bloom, is sort of this mark in the year that gives us a great relief. When the dandelion comes into bloom, it's the greatest nectar flow of the spring. It's the first nectar flow where the bees stop eating the honey that they collected from last season and begin really bringing in and building up stores from this year. So they'll actually leave all of that old capped honey behind in favor of the dandelion. And then the harvest of honey comes in April for us, because that is the true surplus of what the bees have left over from the wintertime. So we don't need to feed our bees hardly ever, because we let the bees go through winter with all of the honey that they need. And then we harvest only when we're sure they have enough. So we're letting our landscape really serve the bees and feeding only when necessary, not automatically. And when we do feed the bees, we feed them honey. And that's what they're meant to eat.
Yeah.
Right.
We can't go too much deeper into that now, but just to say it.
Yep.
So the dandelion comes into bloom about the same time as the orchard, the apples and peaches, and that's also a wonderful boon for the bees, the pears. And then we start planting in our bottom fields. We have big swaths of different clovers and plants for the bees where they can go and get a huge amount of one thing. They go down into that big field, and you go down there and you lay down on a sunny day, and it's like a swarm down there. With in the foreground we have buckwheat, in the background is mustard, yellow mustard, both really great annuals that we can plant for the bees. And then yellow sweet clover. It's a tall clover that grows about 6 or 7 feet tall. It can bloom for about 7 weeks or so, a really great forage for the bees. And then for those of us who have pastures around or grass that we have to mow, the bees tend to encourage the plants that they like by pollinating them and creating more seeds. And year after year, your seed bank of flowers that are great for the bees are going to grow in your landscape. And if you mow in a way that you allow the plantain, for example, to bloom, or the white Dutch clover to bloom, and then you mow it high and just trim off the top like you were trimming a rose to get it to flower more, you'll get those seeds drop down onto your land. The white clover can bloom again. Sometimes we mow and we get 3 cuttings and 3 flowerings or 3 bloomings of the white Dutch clover. So just changing the way we're looking at our landscape with our mowing can be a big boon for the bees and the other pollinators as well. And then if we need to walk somewhere, we can just cut little paths through the grass and let it grow a little bit higher than normal. So this is our sanctuary in the summertime. You can see the echinacea. We have, this is our main perennial garden. So there's a lot going to be in bloom here that the bees can pick and choose from. As I mentioned before, it's really like a medicine to them. This is it looking from the bottom of the hill towards the top of the hill, with Russian sage in the foreground, yellow cosmos and things like that. This is milkweed, not only wonderful for one species of butterfly, the monarch, which completely relies on this plant for laying its eggs for the development of its of its caterpillars into new adults. But the bees love this as well. When you see a flower just covered with them, it's beautiful. Heath aster. This is called mountain mint, one of the bees' very favorites. It flowers for about 2 months, and it's like it's a buzzing scene over there. I mean, when this is in bloom, we have more visitors at the sanctuary than any other time of the year because it's so exciting, and it grows really vigorously and strongly. There's actually there's videos on our Facebook page if people are interested to see what it looks like when this is full of bees. And then the annuals, we fill in around the perennials with annuals. So sunflowers is one, zinnias. You see a nice carpenter bee pollinating right next to a honeybee. This is a scabiosa, poppy.
Beautiful pictures.
Yeah, this is a native. This is called wingstem or stickweed. Also really wonderful fall forage for the bees. And that comes just a little bit earlier than the goldenrod. So this is a showy goldenrod. Another wonderful fall forage for the bees. And it's a really good thing in all of our different localities. We have people here from all over the place to really go and check out what's blooming in your environment anyway. There's this great map actually from NASA, and I can share this in the email with Laura. You can click on your different region where you are located and find out what are the major sources of nectar and pollen for the bees, what are the really significant ones, and when do they come into bloom. And they sort of highlight in orange what is the best source of nectar in the specific regions. And that can be something really important to work with to find out when do you have times when there's not much for the bees, when they would be consuming a lot of honey otherwise if you didn't plant something that they could really utilize.
Oh,
So
I see my favorite plant, poison oak, is on there.
Oh,
we have lots of that here. This is an incredible resource. Thank you so much.
It's a really helpful list. Also, your local bee clubs, your local beekeepers probably know more about what's in bloom than anybody else in your county. So go check out those folks.
Yeah,
that's something really important. And then we also, on our website, we have a list of plants that we've found are the very best for the honeybees. We also sell plants at our sanctuary. And online, for people that can't make it out here, we sell seeds. So we have mixes of short perennials and tall perennials and annuals. Forage for the bees that we're trying to encourage as many places as possible, especially the Waldorf schools in this Waldorf 100 celebration, to get out into their gardens and to create little pollinator sanctuaries at all the Waldorf schools around the country. That it's amazing to hear how many are on this call that already have bees. So I'm sure you have good plants as well. But you can also go online and just see what do we have in these packets. It's very important to get out there also and begin to change our landscapes into sanctuaries where bees and butterflies can come visit us and feel grateful that finally they have this healthy source of nectar and pollen in their environment. So the more we can do planting for them, the better.
And the native bees actually need our help there too, because they are disappearing at a frightening pace. And there is no competition. We find a lot of the native ones side by side to the honeybees. There's really no competition.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention two important workshops that we're teaching this year. One is specifically in honor of this Waldorf 100 celebration, to give the opportunity and to open the door to as many Waldorf students, teachers, parents, staff members that can come out to the sanctuary and spend a week with us. We're giving a little retreat called a continuing education retreat, and giving resources from Gunther's 40 years of Waldorf to all that we're doing at the sanctuary, pedagogy training and how to bring bees into the classroom, some practical advice on how to bring bees into a school in a healthy way and deal with all the issues that could come with that. And then we'll also spend a lot of time talking about landscape and our best suggestions for creating bee sanctuaries at your specific places. So this is not only for Waldorf, but this is specifically geared towards that. So if it would fit your school or your specific program or your nonprofit, we're very welcome to join us for this program. It's on July 11th to the 14th.
Let me say something. I want to say something. That impulse doesn't come from us, but we were asked if we could help that. For the centennial celebration next year, the idea is that as many Waldorf schools as possible have bees part of their curriculum or on their land and caring for them. And that can be a real help in advertising what we do with the children, not just looking at nature from the distance, but really caring for it in a very special way.
Yeah.
So it's a very special workshop that is created for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. And I'll make sure I include this link in the email too, so people can just get right on and register.
Yeah, another one posted on our webpage, and you can look. We're offering 17 or so different workshops this year. So if these two don't particularly suit you, we have one for families and one. We're open to all ages and skill levels here at the sanctuary with our offerings. But I picked these two because I felt it would suit this audience particularly. This one is called the Sanctuary Summer Retreat. And we're envisioning it as sort of a healing retreat to really get into a deeper understanding and a relationship to nature and to the bees and to anthroposophy and to the flowers. And so we're going to be doing Goethean science observation and perception exercises and inspirational lectures related both to the bees and to the landscape. And this is really geared towards the Anthroposophical Society, actually, and people within our community. It's gonna have that spiritual content and that feeling behind all that we're offering. So this is something also we really wanted to share with this specific group.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, so much happening. Oh, look at this picture.
We have school classes coming to us. We had 2 or 3 Waldorf schools already here.
This last year.
Yeah. And so that's one thing we can offer. We also, Alex and I, we also travel. And if there is a need for a workshop or talking to a collegium, sometimes the parents or the teachers are afraid to have bees there. So there's a lot of possibility to engage us as much as we can get away, of course. We have a lot of work at the sanctuary, but to come and visit the sanctuary is very special. I think we've been featured in local television stations and so on because it's really beautiful and unique.
Wow, I want to go. It's so beautiful. Oh, look at these spaces. It's just really incredible. Now, can I ask if there are other people on the call that didn't type in originally and you're at a Waldorf school and you have bees, can you just type that in? Because I think it'd be really great to read all those out, because we did have a few people type that in, and that is part of the goal, part of what Waldorf 100 is trying to get happening. Look at that that classroom space is so beautiful. This is at the sanctuary too?
This is our new building at the sanctuary.
Wow.
Not yet finished, but it will be finished in the next 2 months, we hope.
Yeah.
It's so incredible. That's great. So, okay, the Maine Coast Waldorf School says they have bees. The Santa Cruz Waldorf School has bees in its garden.
Wonderful.
That's wonderful. See if anybody else types anything in there. And I know there are other schools that have bees.
Yeah.
Kimberton Waldorf School is listening, and they have bees, and they teach beekeeping at their school. That's in Pennsylvania. Wow, that's great. Okay, so I guess, is there anything you wanted to close, or we should open for questions? We have technically till 1:45 the hour. So if anybody has any questions they want to ask, we could still, Yes,
Perfect.
yes. So I want everyone to know they're going to get a recording of this, and they'll get.
So can I
Hold on,
mention
hold on.
one thing?
She's breaking.
Oh,
up.
yeah.
All this information, so don't fret if you haven't, if you've missed something. Waldorf School of Atlanta has bees. They would like us to know.
Right.
So I just wanted to just say a little bit more about what OSNA is doing. That's the Association of Waldorf Schools in North America, because we have some Waldorf people, some non-Waldorf people on the call. But with you and with the Sanctuary Gunther and others like Richard Louv, who wrote Last Child in the Woods, if you know that book, the Children and Nature Network and Green Schoolyards America and the Campaign for a Commercial-Free Childhood, all these organizations are working together to form a new, they're calling it an ecological green continental park system in backyards, playgrounds, schoolyards, public spaces. So these green spaces, and they're going to be developed with birds, insects, bees, butterflies, praying mantises, this biodiversity that, biodynamics, obviously, we've got that. So creating a food web for native species and wildlife. And if you can just imagine this amazing map of what this would look like across the country. And of course, Waldorf schools have a big part in that. So,
that's
so
really
thank
exciting.
you for being a part of that. It's very exciting. Yes, and you can contact Beverly Amico at OSNA if you want to be a part of this. If you're on the call and you have questions about it, and I'll include her email when I send out the recording and everything too. So I think we're about at time. Unless you have anything you want to close with, and I know we can support you and make donations to the sanctuary, correct? And we can support you by coming, support you by buying seeds, all kinds of things. But we want to support you. So thank you so much for doing this. Anything you wanted to add?
Well, it's a real pleasure to get together, I must say. We started the sanctuary 10 years ago. We swarmed from Illinois to Virginia, and we are very happy about it. It's a beautiful location, and that we are giving, 17 or 18 workshops this year. Alex has come in 4 years ago. It's just really wonderful that we can serve this impulse, and the bees really need it.
Yes.
And beekeeping is a profession. So the little bit that Alex and I were able to give today is just a more or less a teaser, because it's a profession, and we even have 2-year classes where we go deeper and deeper and deeper. And with the bees, you can't reach the bottom. They are so amazing that there's always more to learn.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, both of you, for your knowledge and your warmth and just everything that you've offered everybody on the call. Thank you so much. And again, if you didn't get your question answered, email it to me or email community@anthroposophy.org, and I'll make sure I pass your question on. And we have everybody just typing in now and saying, thank you, Gunther, thank you, Alex, thank you, awesome, amazing.
Look forward to seeing you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.